The style of play is something we need to change. I've made it clear. Coach has acknowledged it.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball, Instagram is the same, and facebook.com/redrockbasketball. We are back for another of the Season in Review podcast. After today there are only 5 more left of the Season in Review shows, and if you didn't check it out, if you didn't see it, check out yesterday's show with Cole Zwicker as we previewed the 2017 NBA draft, the second part of our draft preview. First part with Sam Vecini, second part with Cole Zwicker. A little bit of overlap between those two shows, but very minimal. Basically, I sort of split the prospects up between both of those guys, and we discussed them all, so go back and check out those 2 episodes. I'm sure you'll find some pretty interesting stuff going down in those shows. But here, we're back to talk about the Toronto Raptors for their season in review. So,
let's get to it.
Let's get to it, Mr. Bolton. The Raptors. I don't even know what to say about their season as an overall. Was it a good one? Was it bad? Was it disappointing? Were they happy? There are so many answers to that question. I feel that depending on who you ask, the people say, "No, we're pretty happy. We had an okay run. We did all right," and then got smashed in the playoffs as what seemed inevitable. We made the right moves. We made moves we needed to move, but there are still things that aren't going to enable us to get over the hump. They finished 51-31, underperformed their expected win-loss by 1 win, so basically right on where they needed to be. They've got pick 23 in this upcoming draft. They had traded away their other first-round choice to get Serge Ibaka, but that's okay because they still had 2 first-rounders in that 20 to 30 range, one of those coming from the Clippers. So they have got 1 pick, no seconds left, just the 1 pick, which is the second they sent to Phoenix for PJ Tucker. So they end up with that 1 pick, pick 23, but they also have free agency questions that they need to deal with, and these are quite significant ones. The less significant ones, Fred VanVleet has got a $1.3 million non-guaranteed deal. I'm not sure about that one. He showed some flashes, and I think they'd probably like to bring him back on that. It's not a big deal if they need to waive him later on at $1.3 million. The other one, which is a guarantee, well, it's actually not a guarantee because it's a non-guaranteed deal. It's Norman Powell at $1.5 million. That will be guaranteed. There is 100% certainty on that. Then you get to the free agency, which is where the questions start to arise. Serge Ibaka, Kyle Lowry, Patrick Patterson, and PJ Tucker are all unrestricted free agents, and all of those guys were absolutely massive parts of this rotation. Players that probably in their top 7, top 8 guys, including Lowry, their best player, and Ibaka, probably their 3rd best player. Some big questions, and did Ibaka show enough to demand a $20+ million deal? Is that what he's going to get? You'd have to think so. So they're going to have to pay up and pay up pretty big. The Lowry one is the most interesting to me because of his age, because of his proclivity for injury, and because he's going to be getting a 5-year Supermax starting at $35 million deal. It's going to be ending at over $40 million by the time he's 37 years old, and that's going to be disgusting. It's going to be horrifically bad, much like the Paul Millsap deal. That's the sort of territory you're in here with Kyle Lowry. Lowry has for the last 4 years after the All-Star break, he gets hurt, he winds down. He plays worse. This is just what happens with him constantly. Dwayne Casey is never seemingly able to adjust by playing him 39, 37 minutes, 40 minutes a game all the way through until we get to that critical period as we head into the playoffs, and then he gets hurt, and this happens all the time. And the ridiculous mismanagement of his wrist injury around the All-Star break was stupid. Sore wrist, plays the All-Star break. Oh, then sorry, I'm out, can't play. It was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. I don't know if the blame for that goes entirely on Lowry, if it goes on the organization. I don't know who it goes on, but someone should be blamed for that absolute catastrophe of a management of an injury, which did cost Kyle, and it just again adds up to his legacy of being this player who, after the All-Star break, gets hurt, or struggles, or winds down, or whatever he does. We know it. It's a constant pattern here from us in fantasy, and the Raptors people must be aware of this also. So this 5-year, $200 million deal that he is going to get, it's going to look terrible. in 2 years' time, 3 years' time. But unfortunately, the Raptors have to do it. I cannot see them not doing it unless Kyle says, you know what, I just don't want to play here anymore. And I don't think that'll be the case, but that's the only way I see Lowry not being in Toronto. I can't see Ujiri come and say, look, Kyle, we're just going to offer you 4 years, $80 million. I can't see that happening. They'll say, here's the max. Do you want it? And it'll be up to him whether he wants to take it or he wants to move on and go to the Spurs or go to the Nuggets or go to the Sixers or go to whoever. I can't see the Raptors not engaging that. The other two guys are really key to what they need to do defensively, Patrick Patterson and PJ Tucker. Tucker came across for those couple of second rounders from Phoenix as, bolstering their lineup to try and help them get past the Cavs. It clearly didn't work, but that's what they were attempting to do. And Patterson is a guy that, while provides pretty much nothing from a fantasy point of view, he is a really key part of this team and a key defensive piece who hopefully can start to learn to hit his threes again after struggling at times last season in a pretty big way. So they have got, I say this for a lot of teams, a very interesting offseason. Utah, Toronto, the Clippers. These three teams have got just ridiculously interesting off seasons. Boston maybe put in there. The curiosity you have with what is going to happen, and maybe all these guys come back, and they probably do, but there are a lot of decisions to be made here in Toronto by Ujiri. We know that one thing, we know that Dwayne Casey will be coming back. I'm a Dwayne Casey critic. Now, he has his good points, no doubt. He does some things that are good, but I do think that he holds this team back with the play style, with some of his substitution patterns, with his use of big men at times. It can be quite confusing with his continued insistence on playing any minutes to DeMar Carroll, and I think all that hampers this team. They could do better. They could have a better offensive style in this team, but in saying that, they still had the 6th best offensive rating for a team this season, which is absolutely staggering considering what their offense consisted of. 2 ISO-heavy guards, and that's it. That was it, Lowry and DeRozan. That's their offense, but still it was the 6th, and it was on historic pace to begin the year. It did cool off as the season went on. They were also 11th in defensive rating and played at a slower pace, just 24th in pace. They got to the line a lot, thanks in large part due to DeRozan, 6th in free throw rate, and they were 4th in turnover. So they held onto the ball very, very well, and that's a key part of keeping that offense going and helping their defense also. On the flip side, they were 4th in steals and 6th in getting to the line. So lots of positives for this team, despite the, I guess, negative end to the season that they had. The best offensive rating on this team, Bebe Nogueira. Yep. Kyle Lowry 2nd, Jonas Valanciunas 3rd, and Jakob Poeltl 4th. And the best defensive rating, oh no, here it is again, Bebe Nogueira. Valanciunas next, Van Vliet, Caboclo, and Siakam rounding out the top 5 in defensive ratings. So as you can see, the offensive and defensive ratings, they really loved Nogueira. A few other things didn't, but I thought he was really impressive, and you know that I've been a Bebe fan. I've got his bloody jersey sitting behind me here, so not many people go out and buy a Raptors jersey and go, okay, just give me that Nogueira jersey. I'm a fan of him, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. He is impressive, and then disappeared. They had 5 guys over 40% on their corner threes. Van Vliet, Bebe, but that's obviously very limited attempts. PJ Tucker, Pat Patterson, DeRozan, while Kyle Lowry was just a disappointing 31% on corner three, so that's something that he needs to improve. He was 68% at the rim, so that's a fantastic number there. An impressive stat I saw with the shooting splits was Jakob Poeltl hit all his mid-ranges at over 50%, so we're not talking just finishing at the rim, like his 10 to 16 footers and his 3 to 10 footers. He was able to hit those at 50% as well, so that's an impressive number for a rookie big man. Lowry was assisted on just 14% of his 2-point attempts, and that's a number for a point guard where you go, okay, that's about right. But then DeRozan at 19%, it just shows how heavily ISO-based this team was, with those 2 guys taking the bulk of their shots and the bulk of them being unassisted. And that's a real indication of what this offense looked like. The PER leader was DeMar DeRozan at 24, and true shooting was Bebe at 68.2, and DeRozan also led in usage at a massive 34.3. Win shares to Lowry, win shares per 48 to Lowry, offensive box score plus minus to Lowry, defensive box score plus minus, my man Bebe. and Lowry led the team in box score plus minus and VORP. So he is the best player on this team. DeRozan did have a very good year, but Lowry is the most important player and is the best player, I believe, for this team. And that's why it's such an interesting decision for them as we head into free agency, as what they're going to do with this guy who is their leader and their best player, and so goes Lowry, so goes the Raptors. Although they did okay when he was out again with that wrist issue after the All-Star break. They had 5 lineups play over 100 minutes this season. The most used lineup, Lowry, DeRozan, Damari Carroll, Pascal Siakam, and Jonas Valanciunas, which was the starting lineup for the majority of the season. That was a minus 10.4 in 364 minutes. It was weird to me that they continued to go with Siakam, who provided a little bit at times, and same as Carroll, who was just putrid for most of the season. But Casey's insistence on those lineups was really frustrating. Their best 5-man lineup, no surprise here. It's that same grouping, but Siakam's out and Patrick Patterson's in. That was a plus 29.7. So based on that, that's a 40 point, what is it? I'm trying to work out my maths here. 40.1 point differential in that most used to best just by substituting Siakam out for Patterson. It's a huge, huge change. Their most used 4-man, Carroll, DeRozan, Lowry, and Valanciunas was a plus 1.9, but their best 4-man was Carroll, DeRozan, Lowry, and Patterson at 31.1. Their most used 3-man, Carroll, DeRozan, Valanciunas, negative 0.6, so about even, while their best 3-man was DeRozan, Lowry, and Patterson at a whopping 24.7. You're seeing Patrick Patterson's name appear here all the time, and he is just giving huge boosts to these lineups. The most used, DeRozan and Valanciunas at plus 8, while the best 2-man, no surprise, Kyle Lowry and Patrick Patterson at a plus 19. So Patterson's name is all over these best lineups. That's something that is a real common theme. And Damari Carroll's name was all over the most used lineups. He was in quite a few of the best lineups as well, so maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on him. But for the main part, he was considerably poor for the season. Damari Carroll was. All right, let's have a look at these players. We'll start to talk about them. We'll go with let's go with who should we? Let's go with Kyle Lowry first, because he is a player that's had some significant success over the course of the season. He was he was second on the team in on-off at 8.6, with Patrick Patterson leading the team there at 10.4. He was the 11th ranked player last season, and I didn't think that was going to be sustainable. It wasn't. He fell down to 19th in my head-to-head rankings. He was 15th in the overall rankings. Post All-Star, he didn't play all that much. He was only at 4 games at 33 minutes, and that saw him drop to 39th in that time frame. So that was his post-injury recovery, and he was fine in that time. Yeah. For the season, Kyle averaged 22.4 points, 3 triples, 5 boards, 7 assists, 1.5 steals, 47 and 82 and 41 from 3 for a true shooting of 62%. Just stupendously good numbers from Lowry. We're talking career high type numbers. In fact, he took his true shooting up by a phenomenal 4.5%, up from 58 to 62.5 this season, and the 3-pointers went from 39 to 41. So just continue. If this is a guy who was a shit 3-pointer for a very long time, shit 3-point shooter for a very long time, and has become a very, very good one now. And his 2-point efficiency, the last 3 years, 42, 41, 43. This year, 47. That is a big, big leap. But still, he wasn't able to maintain the same level of ranking that he had the season before. And the big reason for that is his steal rate dropped. It went from 2.1 down to 1.5. And that sort of a change in that sort of a low volume category has a really big impact in rank. So you can look at what Lowry did. He scored more points, he hit more threes, he had more rebounds, he had more assists, he shot the ball better. And you can say, well, then he was better. But this is the vagaries of rankings, I guess. Maybe not. Maybe vagaries isn't the correct word to say, but it's how, when we're looking at rankings, we do need to be careful with talking about them and saying, oh, this guy's ranked at this number, because the factors that go into them are very sensitive. That's probably the better way for me to say that. They can be sensitive, and you're looking at why things change and why they don't, and all those sort of things is a good idea to heading into next season. And that's obviously what I do when looking at projections for the site for Basketball Monster. And it's not as simple as he went from 9 to 15, so it was a much worse season. in pretty much every category, it was better, except for one, and that significant drop caused that drop of rankings. The thing is his standard score overall value for the season was absolutely identical. So what does that mean? It means that other players may have done better. Some other players have done worse in taking that, the way that the standard scores work, changing his rank down that way. And I don't want to get into too much confusing mathematics with that, but that's sort of what that means. So his overall value number at whatever it was the same. Just where it ranked, pushed him down a little bit lower. So some interesting things there with Lowry, but he was fantastic. I do expect a marginal slide again next season. Just this is what happens as you age. I'm not sure that he can better his shooting. The defensive stuff might struggle to rebound again. You would still expect a 20-7, 20-6.5 type season, but I don't think he gets the 2 steals back. Maybe he doesn't shoot 47 from the field, which again has never happened for him before in his career. So I think that some level of drop-off should be expected from Lowry as we move forward and he turns 32 during the season. Let's talk DeMar DeRozan, who was an all-star, who played 74 games, 35 minutes, 27 points, a huge number there. Only 0.4 threes, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, 47, 84, and a putrid 27% on threes for a true shooting of 55%. We hear all the talk always. Maybe we hear it because I bring it up, but people, no, I'm not drafting DeMar DeRozan, doesn't shoot threes. And that is just a ridiculous criticism, because as I will tell you all the time, it doesn't matter. Get your threes somewhere else. Who else is scoring 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists on 47 with 9 trips to the line and 84% from the line? No one. DeRozan was the 45th ranked player this season, 39th in my head-to-head rankings. He did drop a little bit after the All-Star break, much like the majority of players on this team, but he was still efficient. He still put up good numbers, and he was still a very good player. The interesting thing with DeRozan is that they were 4.7 points per 100 possessions better off when he sat on the bench. That is a very weird number. Lowry was plus 8.6. DeRozan was negative 4.7. That is very weird to me. I don't think it really requires huge amounts of investigation. DeRozan lineups were generally pretty good, but that's a staggering number. And it does give some credence to the fact that Lowry is carrying this team, and having DeRozan as your number one guy can be an issue. So if that was the case and Lowry had left in the offseason, where does this team go with DeRozan carrying things? He's still going to put up his stats, but is the team going to be any good? And that's I guess that's the big question. Much like Lowry, DeRozan had an improvement in his field goal percentage this season from 45 up to 47, and getting to the line that many times and hitting them at that rate is fantastic. The fact that he's also giving you 4 assists per game now and got over 5 rebounds a game and took his scoring up to 27, it makes him that exceptionally valuable, more valuable than you think, guy in the middle rounds, because points and free throw influences at that point outside the top 25, they're really hard to get. It's him, and it's probably him, and it's maybe him and Andrew Wiggins. They're probably the only guy. Maybe you could consider Carmelo Anthony there as a point-scoring free throw influencer, but DeRozan's the better one of those. So if you're down in points and you're down in free throws, you got to make sure you get him, and you have to go around early. You get him, because you just won't be able to do that with any other players in any other area. The other guy who might be able to do that is Devin Booker, who'll be a later pick, who can be a points and free throw percentage influencer. But there aren't many of these players late, and if you don't get them in those categories, they really do become an issue. So that bumps his value up, in my opinion, despite the fact that I know he's a shooting guard. I know he doesn't shoot threes, but you also know I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me in the slightest. Serge Ibaka. Let's look at his numbers when he arrived in Toronto. 23 games, 31 minutes, 14 points, 1.8 threes, 6.7 boards, 1.5 blocks, 46, 88, and 40% from 3. We knew that his numbers had been failing or had been fading in his time in Orlando. In Toronto, he was the 72nd ranked player. Some people seem to think that when he went to Toronto, his numbers would go up. I have absolutely no idea why that thought entered their head. They clearly went down. He was a top 50 player from a head-to-head point of view for the season, found outside the top 50 after the break, and the team was 1.7 points better off with him on the bench as well, which is another curious finding. He is never going to come back to being that top 20 player we saw from him 2-3 seasons ago. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to get Serge Ibaka back to that guy. And I tell you why, it's because the blocks aren't coming back. His last 4 seasons, 2.7, 2.4, 1.9, 1.6. That is the standard pattern of a player whose athleticism has waned. And we can talk about that Serge Ibaka is 27. He might not be 27. And the indicators that we have here from the decrease in athleticism and block numbers and rebound numbers, which have gone from 8.8, 7.8, 6.8, 6.8, those signifiers aren't doing much to back up the claim that, yeah, he is still 27. You'd need Ibaka to get back to 2.7 blocks per game to get into that top 20 discussion, and it isn't happening. So he is never going back to that. Could he be a top 50 player? Well, if he remains in Toronto with Lowry and DeRozan, he won't be. He will be a later round 60 to 85 type of a player. 1.5 blocks, 1.5 threes, 15 and 7-ish type of guy, 14 and 7-ish type of guy on subpar percentages for a player in general, or not subpar, average percentages for a player in general, rather than being these great field goal percentage guy, which so many other power forwards can become. But he is not that guy anymore. I think a top 50 season from him is going to be a challenge if he does remain in Toronto. Obviously, a new team might change that. Might be for the better, might be for the worse. But it can obviously change that. But don't expect his numbers to really come back. And I wouldn't be expecting the minutes to be pushing up. Like, he only played like 30 odd a game. But some of that is going to be dependent on if Patrick Patterson returns, because of how good Patterson was. They had to get him onto the court. So if Patterson doesn't return, maybe they do have to push Ibaka to 33 minutes. And maybe that pushes him from 70th to 60th. So there's a few factors to consider there. But if you're expecting a surge, pun unintended, but I'm happy that I made it. If you're expecting him to surge back up the rankings, I wouldn't be holding my breath waiting for that to go down. Jonas Valanciunas, my boy, it's not going to happen. It's as simple as that to me in Toronto, that it's not going to happen. And it pisses me off absolutely no end, because Valanciunas is good. He is very, very good, and Dwayne Casey refuses to play him. And now, especially with Ibaka around, it's just not going to happen. He played 26 minutes a game for the season, but in the second half of the year, when Ibaka was there, 23 minutes a game. Now, in 23 minutes, he was still a top 90 player. He averaged 11.2 points and 8.8 rebounds, a half a steal, a block, 61 and 71 as his percentages, 63 true shooting. These are all very, very good numbers. He is a top 40 player in 30 plus minutes. I have no doubt about that. He is just not getting to those minutes. The team was 4.6 better off with him on the bench, so like DeRozan, like Ibaka, the team was better with him on the bench, leading credence to those Lowry plus bench units, which you hear the guys like Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue talk about quite a bit. The benefit of those lineups was such a positive for this team. Valanciunas, he's on a very good contract. I think he's an exceptional offensive player, rebounder, and he is nowhere near as bad defensively as what some people would make it out for you to believe, or that Dwayne Casey would have you believe. He is not that bad. Will he be traded if Ibaka returns? Now, Ibaka's best position is at the 5. I don't know, because what are you getting back for Valanciunas? If he finds himself in a situation where he's going to be getting 30 minutes a game, he's a top 50 guy. I've zero doubt about that. He's a top 50 player. My doubt is him finding that situation or getting out of Toronto and getting back to that. So I don't think that Casey is ever going to play Valanciunas, even irregardless, or that's not even a word, regardless of whether Ibaka returns or not. Casey just won't give him 30 minutes, much to his own detriment, in my opinion. And that's a consistent frustration with Valanciunas. So while my belief in his ability, his fantasy ability, his real life ability has not waned, my belief in him being able to realize that ability has. And I just don't think he is ever getting back to 30, despite what we saw in the playoffs in the last season. And Casey's words are, we've got to change our offense, we've got to get the ball to Valanciunas, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And the same bullshit continued. And then you hear at the start of the show that quote from Masai Ujiri, we have to change our playing style. Coach is aware of it. Cool. Does he actually do it? Does he have any control over what this team does offensively? I'm going to guess no. And does that involve, hey, let's give it to this guy who's basically unstoppable when you give him the ball? And that's overstating it quite a bit. But he's bloody unbelievable when he gets the ball offensively. And they move the ball around and move him in and out and let him set some screens and just get him some touches. He can be a dominant force. But I have zero faith in Casey being able to realize that, recognize that, utilize that, and profit from that. If you get a pick late and you're looking for this center with good percentages, who does, if something amazing happens and Casey's actually true to his word and changing the offense and playing him more minutes, then shit, you've got a bargain on your hands. But I have no hope of that actually happening while he is in Toronto, unfortunately. The next highest ranked player on this team was Bebe Nogueira, the 130th ranked player for the season and played 57 games because remarkably he was out of the rotation at the end of the season. The team was 6 points per 100 possessions better off with him on the court. He was the 72nd ranked player before the All-Star break because he was putting up big defensive numbers. Now he averaged only 19 minutes a game and still was the 130th ranked player. 4.4 points and was still the 130th ranked player. 4 boards, but 0.9 steals, 1.6 blocks, 66 from the field and 66 from the line for a true shooting of 68%. He also took a couple of threes and hit them, 25% in total. I don't know what to make of Bebe. At the end of the season, obviously there was Valanciunas, there was Ibaka, there was Patrick Patterson playing at center, and Jakob Poeltl had overtaken him in the rotation. So I don't know where Bebe sits. I really like him. I think he can be a very useful 22-minute-a-game center on numerous teams in the NBA, but I just don't see that being the case in Toronto at all. His defensive stuff is very good. He does have some work to do in terms of rebounding and getting pushed out off the ball and out of position, but his ability to affect shots and protect the rim is important, but I can't see that being anything that happens with this team. Now, Patterson and Barker leaving could open the minutes for Bebe. We saw him and Valanciunas playing together. It didn't work all that well, but he did get some minutes, and he was very useful in that time. But much like Valanciunas, you're hoping on free agency situations to go that way and potentially trades for those guys to find themselves in better situations because like so many of the Raptors players, like Norm Powell, like Delon Wright, Bebe, Jonas, they are fantasy stars potentially waiting to explode in the right situation. They're just not going to find themselves in that situation. But Bebe's a guy that if I'm in a deeper dynasty league, I'm all over because if he gets thrown in a trade, he will find his way, and he should be able to find his way into a decent role. And I think he can be a useful player in limited minutes in real life and in fantasy. I am a big Bebe fan, as you'd probably be well aware. But his second half of the season was putrid as he fell right out. He was 72nd before the All-Star break, 366th after the All-Star break, as he saw his minutes. He played just 9 games after the break and 5.7 minutes per game when Ibaka arrived. That should give you an indication of where they're putting him. For comparison, Jakob Poeltl played 13 minutes in 22 games, so he definitely lost that spot there. So we're talking about, we're just hoping that he goes to another situation at some point and is able to resurrect those numbers because they're there. The ability's there. We just have to wait for that to actually come to fruition, which might not happen. And that is the concern. PJ Tucker started the season in Phoenix, but let's look at what he did in his new surrounds. 24 games for Toronto, 25 minutes, 5.8 points, a 3, 5 rebounds, 1.3 steals, 41 and 67 with 40% shooting from 3. He is far from a sexy fantasy player. He was 162nd ranked in that time in Toronto and a plus 2.9 with his on-off numbers. His value clearly comes from his ability to get steals. Those rebounds out of a shooting guard eligible player are pretty nice as well, but that's sort of where it ends for PJ Tucker. If he remains in Toronto, then he is going to have a limited role. He's not going to be playing 30 plus minutes, and fair enough, because he's not good enough to be doing that. He is 32 years of age. He provides really good defense, but he's not going to be doing much just in terms of being able to play huge amounts of minutes. But he becomes like a Tony Allen type. I need steals. Hey, PJ Tucker's around, let's go and add him. But his upside is non-existent, pretty much. Non-existent upside with some good steal numbers and above average rebounding numbers for that position. But that's where it is. He's just not providing any offense, and that's, of course, you're going to have a pretty severe limitation on him from a fantasy point of view. Speaking of severe limitations, Damari Carroll played 72 games, 26 minutes a game, and was the 162nd ranked player. The team was 2.5 points better off with him on the bench, and I'm not surprised about that. And after the break, he slid down to the 240th ranked player. From the beginning of the season, I was saying that he should not be starting for this team. It should be Norm Powell, and I will continue to say it. I said it pretty much every game during the regular season, and I will continue to say it. Eventually, in the playoffs, we saw Damari Carroll move to the bench. He is not good. He was good for literally 1 year in Atlanta, and we know that even players like Kent Bazemore can be made to look good on the wing in Atlanta. His knees are shot. They feel like they're never coming back. Even when he's out there, he is bad. 8.9 points, 1.5 threes, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 40, 76, and 34 as his percentages for a true shooting of below league average of 53. I have zero faith in Damari Carroll bouncing back and becoming what he is a guy that, best case scenario, maybe he can be the 90th best player, 95th best player. I'm sure if I look at it, he's probably had seasons better than that. Yeah, he's 2 seasons in Atlanta, 77 and 75. Well, that's clearly best case scenario. He was playing 32 and 31 minutes a game there, and he was shooting the ball fantastically, a true shooting of 58 and 60% in those 2 seasons. In Toronto, he's been at 49 and 53. He has fallen off. The offense does not suit him. His play style has fallen off. His defense has fallen off. His ability to stay healthy has fallen off. Everything about him has fallen off. He is not a standard league draftable player at this early stage, in my opinion. He should not be starting, in my opinion. And maybe my opinion actually comes to fruition this offseason and we see them running with him as a bench guy. Maybe they start Tucker, or maybe they go to Powell. Who knows? But they've got so many decisions, and they've got a lot of depth, and that does confuse things from a fantasy point of view. Carroll is bad. He has been bad for 2 years. He was bad for 7 years or 6 years before he arrived in Atlanta, and this is pretty much who he is at this point at the age of 30 with chronic knee issues. This is who he is. Consider him a 14-teamer, maybe even a 16-team league player. Corey Joseph, 181st ranked player for the year, 80 games, 25 minutes, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 0.9 steals, 45, 77, and 36% from 3. All very interesting. He was a team worst negative 5.4, including the guys that played the majority of the minutes. The only player worse actually was Siakam, but he was out of the rotation after about 20 games. Joseph, when Kyle Lowry was out after the break, he did jump up. He was the 147th ranked player. But that's where he tops out. So you can say, oh, Lowry's gone. They're going to start Corey Joseph if that's the situation that happens, which might be. He's not a top 50 upside point guard. He's not a top 75 upside point guard. He's a guy that gets middling assists, average, below average type steal numbers. Or what did he actually do post All-Star? That'd be a good idea to have a look at that. 11, 3.5, and 4.5 with 1.2 steals and 0.8 threes. 111th ranked in overall value in that time. Like that's not great, and that's sort of what you'd expect if Lowry goes. Okay assist numbers, which would make him draftable, but not in that top 70 range, not in the top 80 range, probably not even the top 90 range. He's going to be one of the last point guards you'd even consider looking at. No threes, minimal steals, good efficiency, no offense. And that's sort of who Corey Joseph is. I don't really... he was fine. I would much rather get Delon Wright into that position as the backup point guard. I have zero belief that Casey will do that, and that's fine. That's not that that's a wrong decision. That's what I would do because I do believe in Delon Wright quite a bit. And Joseph just sort of is who he is. I don't like the lineups of playing him at the 2, especially when you had Norman Powell out there who could have been doing that. That was bananas to me that they continued to play Joseph as like a backup 2 and then Powell was out of the rotation 100% entirely, which is just insanity to me that Norm played as little as he did. But I just think Joseph's just very stagnant as a player. This is who he is. There's nothing exciting about him there. Let's talk about Patrick Patterson, who played 65 games, had some significant injuries during the season that did keep him out. 25 minutes per game, 6.8 points, 1.4 threes, 4.5 boards, 0.6 steals, and 0.4 blocks, and really piss poor shooting. 40% from the field, 72 from the line, and 37 from three for a true shooting of 54. And I say piss poor, like the 37 from three is good, but when you're hitting just 40% from the field, that's obviously a concern. Now, he is a guy that put up huge numbers. On-off of 10.4 led the team. We saw his name in all of those massively huge positive lineups. He is very good for this team defensively, but he provides nothing from a fantasy point of view. Nothing that you want in a 12-team and nothing you want in a 14-team league. Man, even in a 16-team league, it's tough to consider Patrick Patterson, considering he was ranked outside the top 220 this season in his 25 minutes. But he provides huge on-court impact. He's the reverse Tony Roten. A guy that can't put up fantasy stats, but it's very important when he's out there on the court. Of course, he is a free agent, so where he goes could change some things, but I don't see him ever being a guy that racks up stats in huge amounts. And if he goes to another team and they go, oh, look at that, we signed Patrick Patterson, he's our starting power forward, we're going to give him 29 a night, I'm not going to say, you know what, let's go, top 100 Patrick Patterson, here we go. I think he sneaks maybe a top 130 in that role, maybe. He just is not a high usage guy whose good defense doesn't translate into good defensive stats. He's not passing it. He's not hitting bulk threes. He's just doing shit that he needs to do. And that's unfortunately not the ninth category in fantasy. Shit that needs to be done. That's not a category. But he'd be pretty much right up there if that was actually a category that counted. Delon. Took a while for Delon Wright to start the season, had that shoulder injury which kept him out the first couple of months of the year, ended up playing just 27 games and 17 minutes a game. I was impressed. 241st ranked player this year, 5.6 points with half a three, 2 assists, a steal, 43, 76, and 33 as his percentages. They played him as a point guard, they played him as a 2 guard, they played him as a 3. His defense was superb, I thought, for the year. I thought he took some strides with his shooting and his offense. I'm a big Delon Wright fan. He had a PR of 15 for the year, which again is super impressive. Above average win shares, a positive defensive box score plus minus, positive box score plus minus. I like this kid. I think he can be a real fantasy asset at some point. Problem is he's third on the depth chart here. So Joseph has to go. It does Lowry go, but he is a dynasty guy for me, and I think that he could be a low end, but a starter, a low end starter, like in the bottom third of starting point guards at some point in the next year or two. I think that he could fulfill that role and in that situation potentially be a top 100 fantasy player for a year or two. So in a dynasty league that's pretty deep, he is a guy that you should be having some level of interest in. He was a positive 3.9 for this team, so the team was successful with him on the court. Before the All-Star break, he only played a few games, but he was a top 170 player in that time frame. He is definitely a name to watch. His ability to get assists, to get some steals, to be decently efficient, I think is something that he can improve on as well. So I do like Delon Wright. I don't think he's got top 50 or top 30 upside, but he is a player that is one of those guys that I like to keep an eye on and see how the situation develops. And with this situation potentially developing in Toronto, there's something to watch there with Delon Wright. Definitely, he's not a name to dismiss at this point. Let's talk about my man, Norm Powell. 76 games for Norm, 18 minutes a game. The fact that he still played 76 games is astonishing considering the fact that he was out of the rotation for such a long period of time. And he would come in, and yes, he played 76 games, but the amount of games that he played at under 10 minutes were ridiculous. Like the first 3 games of the year, he played 4 minutes combined. Like that's disgusting. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10... 11 games before Christmas of under 10 minutes, which is a crazy amount. And then he started off the new year with 8 in 3 games in a row, a 4-minute game, a 6-minute game. Yep, just plenty of games where he wasn't playing. Whenever he started, and this is what would happen, he'd go from out of the rotation to starting for DeMario Carroll, play really well, and then move back out of the rotation. Let's look at what he did in the last game of the year. 25 points in 34 minutes on 77% shooting. Norm Powell is really good. And I cannot say that enough. He's really good. He's better than Damari Carroll. He should be starting ahead of Damari Carroll. He is a top 100 player in fantasy. He was the 258th player this season. Sure, that's not great. He's a guy that I am definitely looking forward to seeing next season, as he's in his third season, as some changes may be happening here in Toronto. Powell is the guy to look at. He can score, he can hit threes, he can play defense, he blocks shots, he gets steals, he can rebound as well. He's not a horrible passer, he's not a great one. He shoots the ball well from the line. He has got top 100 seasons in him. And I believe that this is going to be the season for him to start to step up. It won't be his best year in his entire career, but it'll probably be his best year to date. And I think this is the time that he has to step up, and Casey has to recognize that this is the guy that we do need to go to in this situation. We put him and DeMar on the wings, and he's able to score, provide another option apart from those two guys, play some really good defense, and be a key figure. I'm not saying he's going to play 35 a night, but I would be expecting 25 a night plus out of Powell for this season, and that's well, maybe expecting it's the wrong word. He should be. I'm not sure what to expect from Casey at this point, but I think that US is going to see a big improvement from Norman Powell in his fantasy output for this coming season. Pascal Siakam started off the season as the surprise starter. I wouldn't say he was great. I thought he was all right. He's played 55 games and started 38 of them. He was a 22-year-old rookie, played 55 for the season, 16 minutes per game, 4 points, 3 rebounds, 0.5 steals, and 0.8 blocks on 50% shooting. So the numbers are actually not too bad when you have a look at them. The lack of offense is the real concern, though. His steals, his blocks, his rebounding can all be useful, but he provided no threat whatsoever on the offensive end. And in the end, that was what related. That's not the right word. That's what resulted in him being removed not only from the starting lineup but from the rotation completely when Patrick Patterson was healthy, when Bebe moved into that starting lineup. But for a rookie, he had a solid defensive box score plus minus, good win share numbers, positive VORP, PR of 11.5, like some okay numbers, and there is room for him to improve. But with so many other guys there, Ibaka, Valanciunas, Bebe, Pirtle, you feel that Siakam's a long way off, and he doesn't project super well for fantasy. But I think there might be a little bit of a hint of a spark there for him in coming years. I'm not totally ruling out. I'm not fully on board with it. I'm not totally in on it. But he was impressive at times with his defensive work and his rebounding work. Just with the other players on this team, he's never going to develop into a star. He's not going to develop into a star regardless of where he goes. But with the other guys around here, his path to consistent fantasy value is pretty limited. Pirtle wasn't a great start to his rookie season. 54 games, 11.6 minutes, but picked it up exceptionally towards the end. In that, for the season, he averaged 3 and 3. After the All-Star break, he was at 4 and 3.5, half a block, 0.3 steals, 68% from the field. A disappointing 52% from the line, and I think that will be able to improve. But his ability to be such an efficient shooter, he is quite a strong rebounder, is going to hold him in good stead. I think he can be a player that averages 1.5 blocks and 1.2 steals, and maybe gets you 13 and 9. I think he's got a pretty decent future despite a disappointing season rookie-wise. When you look at his fantasy numbers and his metrics from this season, it wasn't fantastic. But I do think that he has got a pretty good future. He's 21 years of age. His defense was very good for a young big man. His shooting was sensational, a decent PER, above average win shares per 48, a positive defensive box score plus minus. All these things were in his favor. Much better prospect than Siakam, and he clearly moved ahead of Nogueira in the rotation. And that's part of the reason why I am skeptical of Nogueira having any value in Toronto with these other guys around. Pirtle is the guy to watch, and to be honest, as much as I love Valanciunas, but the way that Casey loves Valanciunas is much different. I wouldn't be surprised to see Pirtle by the start of the 18-19 season being the starting center here. So he does have some dynasty value. He's got some buy low ability still, and probably still will for the next 6 to 8 months. but I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing him push forward. I don't think he's ever going to become a top 30 center, but he would definitely be, in my mind, to be a 70 to 100 guy for a few seasons in his career. Really impressed with that second half of the season that Pirtle had. Fred VanVleet played 37 games, 8 minutes per game, 3 points, 0.9 assists, half a steal. Yeah, whatever. He's there. He's the fourth string point guard. There's just too many guys there ahead of him. Joseph, Wright, and Lowry, of course. He was fine. Nothing stood out to me about Fred VanVleet as being someone I need to get super on board with. And the last player, of course, is Bruno Caboclo, who in his third NBA season played 9 games, 4.5 minutes, 1.6 points, and just appears destined to never be good. Now, we know the famous 2 years away from being 2 years away quote. We've got 1 year left in that before the end of his rookie deal, and he has not provided anything. He's done some good stuff defensively in the D-League. He has improved his offensive performance in the D-League as well. But I just don't know what to make of him from an NBA level. He's clearly behind Carroll, behind Powell, behind Tucker. On the wings here, Delon Wright was even playing at the 3. He's got, clearly a long way to go in terms of being able to do anything from a fantasy point of view or from a real life NBA point of view. It is confusing. I'm just going to bring up his D-League stats here. He played, and this was now. Did the Raptors want 905 win the D-League, or was it Rio Grande Valley? I think it might have been Rio Grande Valley. But anyway, they're in the final matchup. This season he played 34 games for Raptors 905, averaged 9 points in 27 minutes, or 10 points in 27 minutes, 5.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 1 steal, 1.2 blocks, 41% from the field, 33% from 3. Like, there is nothing spectacular about that except for the defensive stuff, which was really good. Defensive box score plus minus in the D-League of 2.4. But a PR of 12.5, a true shooting of 50, a net rating of -1 in the D-League. Look, these are not good numbers for a guy that should be, at this point, 3 years in the D-League, be starting to dominate. For as excited as we want to get, I think the dream is over for Bruno Caboclo. Let's get questions. Now, Jordan, who I know is a massive Raptors fan, he is first here on the questions. Would Dwayne Casey allow Jonas Valanciunas to play 30 minutes a game, even if Jonas was the only center on the roster? The answer to that is no, he would not, because he would play Damari Carroll at center. He would play PJ Tucker at center. He would play Delon Wright at center. He would not allow that under any circumstance, because he hates him. And Casey, good job. Danny, if Lowry leaves, does Joseph or Wright start? Good question. I would be stunned if Casey went with anyone apart from Joseph. I would go with Wright, but I would be stunned if he went a different direction. What's your best case scenario for Delon in his career? Did you see any improvement in his second year? Tons of improvement. What's your best case scenario? He can be a top 120 player. For maybe a 3 or 4 season run, I could see that being the case for him. Blue Jays 88. Guess you're a Raptors fan as well. What differences do the Raptors need to make on offense to look better in the playoffs? Can they compete versus the Cavs? Well, I'll answer the second part. Can they compete versus the Cavs? Probably not. I can't really see that happening. But they need to get more ball movement going. They need to stop these ISOs with DeRozan, or not stop them, but reduce them. That's the problem. That DeRozan and Lowry, it just becomes so predictable. They're just going to hold the ball and they're going to have it the whole time. You get Norm Powell involved, get Valanciunas involved, get Ibaka involved. Just more. They've got talent. They've got other options to do this. They just need to change the way that they look at their roster in that sense, or look at their offense in that sense. Ben says, do the players they have now fit the non-ISO system being promised? Lowry can play that system. I got no doubt about that. I think even DeRozan can play it to a degree. But yeah, look, as I said, Valanciunas is a significant offensive weapon. Ibaka can be an offensive weapon. Norm Powell can be an offensive weapon. PJ Tucker's not really. They probably need another shooter at some point at the 3 or the 4, someone to help shoot there, or even a backup 2 who shoots in place of instead of playing Corey Joseph in that spot. But that's where Powell can come in. So I guess so. Does JV get traded? To who? I don't think they will. I don't know. No, I don't think they'll trade him. Does Casey make it to the All-Star game? I'm going to say no. Yeah, I'll say no. Because you have to be the number 1 seed at a certain cutoff before the All-Star break, and it can't be the same coach 2 years in a row, so that means that Boston can't get it, but I would assume the Cavs or Ty Lue will go back there and be the All-Star coach this year. Blue Jays again throwing it in. How do they replace Patterson's contributions? Well, he hasn't gone yet. Maybe hard to re-sign him with a cap situation. They can re-sign him if they want to go into the tax, and that's completely going to be up to ownership. How do they replace him? It's going to be tough. They're going to hope you're going to have to get a step forward from guys like Pirtle and maybe play him a little bit at the 4, play smaller with Carroll and Tucker at the 4 more, providing that defense. I think that'll mainly go to Tucker as well, filling in Patterson's contributions there. And some more responsibility has to go onto Pirtle's shoulders as he fills in those minutes at the 5 that Patterson was playing there as well. He also says, should the Raptors actively trade Valanciunas and Kojo? Should they actively trade him? Well, it's all well and good to say that, right? Okay. But in the end, and this is something that I think a lot of people need to think about when talking about this, why would you go out of your way saying, I need to get rid of this guy? How does that benefit you in any way? It doesn't benefit you at all to get rid of someone. Like, we're going to be better because I'm going to trade away Valanciunas. Okay, who's coming back? Troy Williams? Like, you get better by bringing in someone. And whether the cost of that is giving up Valanciunas and saying, you know what, he is available. I am okay with moving him on. But being active just to get rid of someone, it doesn't benefit you in the slightest. It's all about who you get back. So that is, and maybe that sounds simplistic, but you're actively going out to trade these guys for the purpose of trading them when it's all about what are you getting back. So if someone comes to you and says, I want Valanciunas, I'll give you something valuable, I'll give you a shooting 4 or whatever it is, even though you've got one in the Barker, I'll give you some wing depth. You go, okay, I'd consider that. I love Valanciunas, so I wouldn't be doing that, but Casey's never going to play him. Who should they target in the draft? That part of the draft's a weird spot. Just get wings. Terrence Ferguson, if he falls, would be a good pick there. Jonah Bolden would be awesome for them. That's who I want them to take. If Jonah Bolden's there, that's who they should get. And what do you do with Delon and Pirtle? Nothing. You let them develop. Pirtle is going to be a good player, and as is Delon. You just let them keep developing as they are. Nathan Olsen, should Toronto not consider tearing it down and starting over? It's pretty clear they're not going to get over the hump with this squad. But in the end, Nathan, 29 teams don't get over the hump, and you can't tear it down every time. Now, I understand that there's frustration from the Raptors fans. You're pushing up and being this good, but how fun is it being good? It's good, and it is frustrating not getting there, but is it more frustrating being the 14th best team or being the 5th best team? And all the hope that you get, all the enjoyment from seeing high-level play for multiple seasons, I wouldn't be so... If you're sitting in the Pacers spot, if you're sitting in the Bulls spot, if you're sitting in the Grizzlies spot, I'm more likely to tear it down and go, we're just stuck in this middle of a bullshit 500 ball that's not getting us anywhere. Happier to tear it down and build up from there. If you're sitting competing for the 1 seed, much like with the Clippers, yes, you're competing for, and at some point it's going to crash down. Yeah, it's going to happen naturally, but accelerating it, I don't really see the point in that. Kyle Norb, how excited are you for a 3rd-year jump from Norm Powell? Kyle, come on, man, you know it. I'm pretty excited. If this team falls apart with free agent mass exodus, is DeRozan ready to handle the burden of playmaker? No, and would it help, hurt, or be neutral? He gets good assist numbers, and maybe he pushes it to 4.5, 4.8 per game, maybe close to 5 with his assist numbers. But no, he can't handle an offense by himself. Would it hurt, help, or be neutral? It would hurt him. His efficiency would drop, I think, as well. It's hard for you to see him scoring more than 27 points per game, but I can't see it helping him if all those guys left. And Kyle says, are we now just 2 years away from Caboclo? We're 1 year away, mate. 1. Toddy Bridges, should the Raptors let Lowry walk and draft Juwan Evans at 23? I don't think Evans will be there at 23, so no, and that's not, I would never consider, I've got pick 23, I'm going to let my franchise point guard leave so I can draft a point guard at pick 23. I don't think that would be the way that Ujiri would approach it. That's not the way I would approach it by any stretch of the imagination. Letting Lowry walk is a different consideration. than saying let's let him walk because we can draft one at 23, because that contract's going to be disgusting. And I would, without having the emotional ties to Lowry or having the interpersonal relationships with him and the front office and the team and the coaching staff and the fans, from a purely business perspective, you go, that's going to be a shit deal. If it's 5 years, 200 plus, it is a terrible deal, and it will kill us when we are looking to rebuild. And I would consider letting him walk. But I wouldn't do it just because I have an outside chance of drafting a guy who probably only projects to be a backup in Jawan Evans. At the lead DFS, so many Raptors questions. If Lowry leaves, do you think this benefits the Raps long term if they want to make a deep playoff run without Lowry's playoff inconsistency? Long term it will, because it will. They won't be stuck in that time when they will be bad anyway with a bad contract. But I'm not sure that losing Lowry makes it more likely you make a deep playoff run. Yeah, I don't see that being the case. Him staying around does hamper your team in 4 years' time, but I don't necessarily think it's the best thing to do. I'm torn on it. Last question. Stoods. Will Casey now use Norm more? Who knows? Even as a sixth-man type, after he proved so effective late last year, how will he be impacted by Lowry, in or out? I did say this earlier on. I do think that Casey goes to Powell more and has to finally realise that Carroll is shot and Powell is the better option there. So I can see him playing more. He should be playing over Joseph. He should be playing over Carroll. So yes, I do think he will use more. Impacted by Lowry, in and out. Yeah, marginal impact. Maybe it enables Powell to get a few more shots, but I don't think it... And what it could also do is if, say, Lowry leaves, it pushes Joseph's more minutes from the 2 to the 1 and opens up minutes at shooting guard for Powell. So that could help him in that sort of an aspect. All right. That does it for today's show, guys. Go back and check out the 2 draft preview shows with Sam Vecini and Cole Zwicker. And subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, and Stitcher to make sure you never miss an episode. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Masai Ujiri.